Okay, we're live. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining me today. So today we're going to embark on a new topic altogether, new study that we're doing, and the study is the veil of self. This is going to be part one, meaning that we are going to have a part two, perhaps a part three and four in this particular series. The last series that we did, I know a lot of people watched that, but this is going to be far much more different because there is something very important that we ought to understand in our Christian walk, in our walk in life about self, right? So that's the topic that we're going to talk about. And as a way of introducing this topic, I'll start with an introduction, then I'll give you a bird's eye view, more like a psychological diagnosis of our current condition as a generation. I know it's a sweeping statement to say that, but I'm going to give you a psychological condition of our generation in relation to self. Then after that, I'll give you the biblical view, the diagnosis that the Bible gives us. Then we'll slowly build on that in this introduction. And I'm hoping that somebody out there would stay tuned and please listen through these presentations that I'm going to make. It's a new series altogether, and we're talking about the veil of self, right? And as a way of introduction, I have a very subtle message for you who is out there. It's going to present both hope and horror. So it's that kind of a message. It's such kind of a presentation that presents to you a lot of hope, but at the same time, we're not negating reality. We're putting into consideration the horrors that we have to deal with when it comes to self, right? It should terrify you to listen to these messages because not so many preachers will, or not so many people will actually dive and start talking about the aspect of what we're going to talk about in this series, right? But at the same time, this series is going to present desperately, there's a desperation of hope that we need in another being in terms of our reality, right? Ultimately, what this series is going to do is to make a demand of your faith. Remember, Jesus' primary concern is that when the Son of Man cometh, when he comes the second time, will he find faith? That's a question that he poses out there. Is he going to find faith? So this series is going to make an ultimate demand of your faith, right? So that's an introduction. So here's a bird's eye view of our current condition as a generation. I'll give you a diagnostic view of our psychological condition. Then after that, I will give you the biblical view of our diagnostic condition of the time that we're living in. If we have the diagnosis right, then the treatment is going to be right. There is no way we're going to seek treatment if the diagnostic information is wrong. If we're using the wrong mirror or the wrong diagnostic tools to come up with a diagnosis about who we are and what's going on with us as human beings, we'll have the wrong remedies. And the wrong remedies will make sure that our condition perpetuates, right? Our condition does not end, right? So here is the current diagnostic in a very psychological condition of where we are as a generation as we talk about the veil of self. Now, we are living in a generation where we are entitled, there's pain avoidant, there's faithless, self-worshippers, impulsive, impatient, impetuous, dramatic, emotional, or erratic. We have a lot of borderline personalities going on, very narcissistic type of generation, histrionic and antisocial. Now, I'm giving you all this as a diagnostic at the psychological level, but I would also want to look at the biblical diagnosis of where we are, just to add on to what I've talked about already in terms of the diagnosis. Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 3. We'll begin reading in verse 3. I think it's in verse 1. 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3, and I'll begin reading from verse 1. Now, this is the biblical diagnosis of the time that we're living in, and these accord the last days. This is what the Bible has to say. Listen to what it says in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 1. It says, but understand this, that in the last days dangerous times of great stress and trouble will come. I don't know if you do not know, but our current condition in the world, that there's a lot of stress. We deal with a lot of burnouts, whether it's in a work condition or in just life in itself. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of cortisol that has been released into these bodies, and we're trying to deal with the outcome, whether it's at an economic level, at the relationship level, at the spiritual level. There is a sense of a war that has been magnified because of the times that we're living in. So the Bible says this. It says, understand this, that in the last days, dangerous times will come of great stress and trouble. There will be difficult days that will be hard to bear. For people will be lovers of self. And we're going to talk about the veil of self. In brackets, in the Amplified Bible, they say lovers of self. In brackets, they say narcissistic and self-centeredness. That's the description that I just gave you at the psychological level. Lovers of money, impelled by money and greed. We're using money now as a matrix of value. If you don't give me money, then you're not valuable to me. If you don't give me this, that's the metrics of the time that's the metrics that we're using to determine if somebody is valuable to you. Listen, it says, lovers of money, impelled by greed, self-centeredness, boastful, arrogant, revelers, disobedience to parents, ungrateful, unholy, and profane. There is no distinction between that which is holy and that which is profane. Everybody else apparently is a Christian. And they will be unloving, devoid of natural human affection, callous, numb, inhuman towards each other, irreconcilable, malicious gossip. Now, gossip is a type of human cannibalism. You literally put a person on a plate and begin to eat and devour them. That is malicious gossip. And devoid of self-control, intemperate and immoral, brutal, haters of good. They would rather love the things that are bad than the things that are good. Haters of good. This is God's diagnosis of the time that we're living in, guys. Verse 5, it says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 5, it says, holding on to a form and outward of godliness, religiosity, right? Although they deny its power, for their conduct nullifies the claim of the faith that they have. Avoid, it says, avoid such people and keep away from them. So the Bible puts an injunction of this diagnostic view of the kind of people that are going to exist in the last days. Then it says, avoid such people and keep away from them. Do not have any interactions with such people. Avoiding such people. Do not even engage in any relationships with such kind of people. For among them are those who worm their way into homes and captivate morally weak and spiritually dwarfed women, weighed down by the burden of their sins, easily swayed by various impulses. This is the Bible's description of the time that we're living in right now. Verse 7, it says, always learning and listening to everybody else who teaches them, but never coming to the full knowledge of the truth. What is truth supposed to do? The truth that we learn constantly. Even this video that I'm putting out there are people who constantly hear, but never really coming to the full knowledge of the truth. The full knowledge of the truth should be transformation. That's what truth is supposed to do. Truth is supposed to be curative. That is what is curative, whether it's in a therapy session, whether it's when you hear the truth is supposed to set you free. Now, the truth sets you free mentally, spiritually, physically. Truth is what is clear in its diagnosis, right? So it says they're always learning, but never coming to the full knowledge of the truth. Just as these magicians during the time of Moses opposed Moses, so that these men also oppose the truth. Men of depraved mind, unqualified and worthy as teachers in regarding to the faith. Verse 9, it says, but they will not get far. They will not get very far, for they are meaningless nonsense and ignorance, meaningless nonsense and ignorance, they become obvious to everybody else around. Now, the teachers of truth that are out there, the teachers or the claimers that they're teaching the truth, in their boastful claim as being a pastor, being an apostle, being a bishop, being all these titles that people really indulge themselves into, the Bible clearly says they will not get far, because everybody else will be able to see through their nonsense, their meaninglessness, right? So that's the diagnosis that the Bible gives. So as we talk about the veil of self, I want us to dive in and look into this aspect of lovers of their own selves. Why do I want us to dwell on that? And why is that very important? Because recently when I went to a church to preach, one of the most contagious issues that came up was a lot of people, even in the church, do not want to let go of the darling called self. There's a lot of self that is preached out there that people have gotten comfortable into thinking it's actually Christian, right? So we need to spend time dissecting, because I never really had the time when I was presenting this to them to really spend time to see the reality of what God has to say about self. Self-love, self-indulgency, self-pleasing, self. Self is on a display wherever you turn. It's everywhere else. Selfie. So we're living in that world where self is on the throne of so many people's hearts that Jesus has been displaced completely, even in the church, right? And I'm saying this because it is biblical. God has literally put it out there in the book of Revelation to the last church, the Laodicean church, which is a picture of our Christianity, and not just our Christianity, but also the reflection of the spirit of the age, of the Laodicean, which is Jesus is not in the church. Jesus is outside knocking and says, I knock at the door. When he should come into our hearts and sit there, but we are slumbering in the bed of self. Self is the one that is ruling. We're entitled, we feel, we deserve. There's a lot of deserving that we have, and at the throne of our hearts, the one who sits there today is not Jesus. Jesus is knocking on the outside of the church. He's knocking on the outside, says, if any man hear me, I will come in and sup with him and he with me, and I'll be his God, his Lord, to control the citadel of your heart, the citadel of your life, right? So lovers of self, let's dive into in 2 Timothy, again, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 4, it says, they'll be traitors, heady. Have you ever seen people and how they move, how they put their head like this? Like this. I've ever seen photos of people that sit there and they're just looking, the proud look, right? There's this proud look that we have. Heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure. Just check out what happens on Fridays, right? Check out the lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. During the weekend, when it's supposed to be a day, when we're supposed to be reconnecting ourselves with our Savior from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all these weekends are spent in what? Pleasure. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And they claim they are children of God. Apparently, everybody else is a child of God. How absurd. How absurd that we can claim that every single day, Friday night, evening, Saturday, and even Sundays, you're all over partying. Then now you come back and claim to be a child of God. How pathetic should that be? Listen to what it says. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. In Romans chapter 15, we're still exploring the aspect. Thank you for joining me. Mundeke is watching. Awesome. Okay. Romans chapter 15, verse 1, it says, We then, who are strong, ought to bear the infirmities, the weaknesses of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Now, I'm giving you the biblical diagnosis on what it says about pleasing self and self. Then we'll go on after that and just explore, right? Romans chapter 15, verse 2, it says, let every one of us please his neighbor for his good to edification. So I'm supposed to please my neighbor and not me for their edification, right? That's what the Bible says. Verse 3, it says, for even Christ. Now, after saying all this in verse 1, Romans chapter 15, verse 1, it says, for we who are strong ought to bear the infirmities of those that are weak and not to please ourselves. And then it says in verse 2, let every one of us please his neighbor for their edification, for their well-being, so that they're edified. And then it gives us the demonstration of what Jesus did. Because if you claim to be a Christian, is that the one that you follow after, the one that you pattern after, has already given you a demonstration of how things ought to be and ought to be done. That's why he says, love one another as I have loved you. I have given you a demo. Now go ahead and follow after my demo. Not your way, but my way. It's his way, not our way. Right? Listen to what it says in verse 3. It says, For even Christ pleased not himself. As it is written, the reproaches of them that reproach thee fell upon me. He's quoting Isaiah, literally quoting the Old Testament. When he says the reproaches that fell upon thee, these are the children of Israel when they were reproached, when they were in slavery for 400 years. The reproaches that came upon them, they fell upon Jesus. He says, I've heard the cries of my people, and now I'm coming to intervene on their behalf. So the pattern man, Jesus, says he pleased not himself. Let's see if we're Christians. This is a challenge to me. It's a challenge to you that is going out there when it comes to self, right? In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 15, the Bible has this to say. It says, and that he died for all, Jesus died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves. Now, this is the mindset of God. There's the mindset of the devil. You can choose to be in the mindset of the devil, or you can choose to adopt the mindset of Jesus. The problem is that self love the things of the devil. Self is so akin, so in line with the devil, that everything that the devil presents is so alluring to us, and everything that God presents doesn't seem to be that appealing to us. That is why God had to say, I have to put enmity between thee and the serpent. Enmity. Why? It's because there is friendship. We are buddies. Self is buddies with the devil. And God had to take the initiative. Because of his grace, he had to take the initiative of initiating enmity, that I'll put the enmity between thee and the serpent, so that you're not buddies anymore. It says, for he that died for all, that they that live, you and me that are alive, should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him who died for them and rose again. Who do we live for? My life is sold out to Jesus. Philippians chapter 2, verse 21, it says, for all seek their own, not the things that are of Jesus Christ. For all that seek their own, my own happiness, my own life is what matters to me. At the same time, you claim to be a Christian. And I've come to an understanding is that some people are actually not Christians. And it's okay, even in the church, there are people that are not Christians. Because the Christian mindset is different. The Christian mindset is self-abasement, not self-exaltation. The Christian mindset is self in the dust, not self on the throne. The Christian mindset is Jesus on the throne, not self on the throne. James chapter 2. I'm just giving you the biblical view before I go on into ranting and giving you everything else that's psychological. Listen to what it says in James chapter 2, verse 8. It says, if ye fulfill the royal law according to the scriptures, Loyalty. We belong to the loyal family, the King of the universe, the Lord of lords. If you want to fulfill his law, to make it into for wishing, the way Jesus Christ came and fulfilled the law. It says, if you fulfill the loyal law according to the scriptures, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, you do well. The only metrics that I know that I love myself is not in self-gifting, self-celebration. No, the only metrics that I have to know that I love myself is how do I treat the extension of me, of that person who is next to me, who is my neighbor. That's the only true metrics that God has given us. He's given us, it says, greater love has no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friend. That is the greatest matrix, or that is the greatest measure you can use to find if you really love yourself. How do I treat the people that are outside of me right now? Because they are an extension of me. Every other human being around you is an extension of you. So how do I know that I love myself? How do I treat those people that are my neighbor? Then I know that I love myself. The prominency in self-worship is one of the things that is so prominent in our generation. We worship ourselves. We gift ourselves so much. And hence the emptiness, the levels of depression, anxiety are on the rise because self is on the throne. Right? One of the things that we do with people that have got depression issues, we always tell them, get out of your mind, get into your life, get into service, serve others. And the more you spend time serving others, the more that depressive spirit leaves you. Because depression is a very selfish condition. Because the end game of depression, we all know. You can ask the best doctors if you want, right? The people that you trust that will give you, whether it's insights into human nature, you will know that the end game of depression is what? Suicide. And suicide is a very selfish step that you take as a human being. So to get out of that, instead of self-counsel, learn to sacrifice yourself for the needs of others. Let's see how quickly you come out of that depression. When you do not put yourself on a pedestal anymore, when you don't think you're so important, because ego, we have an ego as human beings, right? Ego is the one that easily gets hurt. Ego is the one that is couched and seated in deserving, where you feel you deserve a certain treatment. This is mine. And the devil, in the demonic realm, as we go into this study, you discover conversations that even demons have about human beings. And how we are so blind that I want your hearts to be open to see the veil of self, so that we begin to tear it apart and not sew it together. Because the veil that was rent in the Bible, we'll go through all these things. I'm getting excited because I know where we're going with this particular study. So the prominent, let me read to you some of the quotation. This is from Desire of Ages. Listen, prominency is self-worship. And this is a very sweeping statement. For those that still believe that, I still have to indulge self, listen to this statement. In Desire of Ages, page, this is the greatest commentary on the life of Jesus, right? Desire of Ages, page 57, paragraph 3 says, the worshippers of self belong to the kingdom, to Satan's kingdom. Just pause for a minute. Just pause and think about that. The worshippers of self belong to the kingdom of who? The devil, Satan's kingdom. In their attitude towards Christ, all they would show on which side they stood, and thus everyone passes judgment upon himself. Our attitude towards Christ. Christ doesn't matter. I don't care what he says, but what I say is the one that matters. Worshippers of self belong to the kingdom of the devil. There are two sets of children. They're children of God and children of the devil. Do not lie to yourself into thinking you're a child of God. You're not a child of God until you're so entirely. The Bible says so. I am not a child of God until I am so entirely. It says one flaw makes the chain worthless. So one defect would spoil the character, and if not overcome, will gain the mastery. Self is our greatest enemy. And day by day, each one must strive for victory. There's a point in which you must strive. You're in a war. You're not supposed to indulge. You're supposed to fight. There must be no careless, haphazard work in the foundation chosen or in the structure built upon thereof. Our physical, our mental, and our moral powers must be trained physically. Self must be trained. Mental, moral powers must be trained. Every ability must be cultivated and used to its fullest extent. Every power must be brought into working in order. Self must not struggle for mastery. Self is the greatest enemy. Another statement. Self is the greatest enemy which we have to contend. We have to contend. The problem is that we play dead with the devil. We play dead with self as well. But there is a point of contention, of fighting, of wrestling. But obedience to all the commandments of God gives self the proper recognition. You want self to be recognized? Learn to obey the law of God. For we are to esteem ourselves. How are we to esteem ourselves? Not self-esteem, but here's how we are supposed to esteem ourselves. We are to esteem ourselves as the property of Jesus Christ. Appropriate in value to the infinite price that was paid for us. While God and His law are made supreme. How am I supposed to esteem myself? How are you supposed to view who you are? I am the property. Don't you know, Paul says this to the Corinthians. He says, don't you know that you're not your own? No, I'm my own. I'll make my own decisions. I'll do this. I'll do this. No. You're not your own. No, I belong to me. This is mine. No. Everything was created for Christ, in Christ, and for His glory. So argue with the testimony that Jesus gives about you. You can spend time arguing with that testimony, or you can bow to it and confess that you, like God is right and you are not right. I'm to esteem myself as the property that belongs to Jesus Christ. Paul says that you're not your own, that you were bought with not gold and silver, but with the precious blood of Jesus. That is the value that God has placed upon you as a human being. In that essence, I am to align myself, my life, and everything else is supposed to align with Him and not with self. And the golden chain, he says, and the golden chain reaching from the throne of God binds us by obedience, every man that through Jesus Christ would give his own life for the fallen race of a fallen man, the constitution of perfect wholeness, and the development of a healthy, symmetrical Christian character. We want to be healthy, symmetrical, not bend, right? As Christians, is this consecration that we need to be. Our obedience bind us to the throne of God. Right? Let's go on. So I'm going to read to you a statement. This is Dr. Tozer, one of the Christian fathers. Listen to what Dr. Tozer said about this subject of the veil of self. There's a very beautiful statement that I'm going to read to you from Dr. Tozer, A.W. Tozer, one of the most remarkable Christians that has ever existed. And listen to what he said about this subject of the veil of self. He said, there is something more serious than a coldness of heart. Now we know that we're living at a time where people's hearts are very cold. And Jesus made a prediction of the coldness of heart. Nothing should take you by surprise if you're reading the Bible. You're going to meet people that are so cold-hearted. Listen to what it says in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. This is Jesus speaking. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. So Dr. Tozer here says, and I put that verse in, it's because it's important. I was trying to see if he's reasoning from a biblical point of view. Here's what he says. There's something that is more serious than the coldness of heart. Something that may be the cause of its existence. What's the existence of this love of many that wax cold? The Bible just told us that iniquity, and if you look at the word iniquity, come on now, iniquity, there's sin, There's transgression, and then there's iniquity. Iniquity, I'm going to give you a Hebrew picture of what iniquity entails. Remember in the Old Testament, every time there was a ceremony that was to take place, or a festival that was to take place, they were supposed to blow a trumpet. There is a particular trumpet, especially on the Day of Atonement. Now remember, I've been talking to you about immersing yourself into the reality of the Day of Atonement, the times that we're living in. And then there are a lot of people that do not know what is he talking about. What is the Day of Atonement, right? I want you to go back and follow the series that I do. You begin to see what the Day of Atonement really is. Now, on the Day of Atonement, I just want to give you a backdrop of the word iniquity so that you understand. Because Jesus here tells us, listen to what Jesus says, says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And Dr. Tozer here says that there's something that is far much more serious. That is also the cause of the cold-heartedness that we see. The cold-heartedness that we see. What is the cause of that? It's the abounding of iniquity. And what is iniquity after all? Now, during the Day of Atonement, there was a horn that was on the 10th day of the 7th month. There was a horn that was blown in the Old Testament. And that horn is a twisted horn of an animal. It's called, what is the horn called? I've forgotten the name of the horn. But it's a horn of a twisted horn of a lamb, of an animal. Now that animal is an animal crying out, right? Now the twistedness of that horn and the sound that it would produce, it's a cry that people would have. It's a depiction of the cry of the soul, the twistedness that is the iniquity. The twistedness that we have inside it depicts that, right? So the shofar, it's called the shofar. Sorry for that, I've forgotten the name. But it has come to me. It's called the shofar. So when the shofar was blown, the shofar horn that is made of this animal that is crying out, it's a depiction of the Day of Atonement, of the cry that we ought to give on the Day of Atonement, the twistedness of our nature, the lamentation that you find in the book of Romans chapter 7. You find Paul says, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of sin?" He sees the twistedness that is in him. He begins to see the covetousness of his own nature. And he cries out that twistedness. That is the iniquity that abounds. And iniquity is tied to our nature, the self, this sinful nature. There are other people who don't think this nature, this carnal nature. Romans chapter 8. I'm going to go to Romans chapter 8. I just want to belabor this before I read this statement. I didn't plan for Romans chapter 8, but God is saying go to Romans chapter 8. Let's see if we can obey God. Let's go to Romans chapter 8. I'm going to try to get to Romans chapter 8 as quickly as I can so that I show you something from there. Because Romans chapter 8 begins to tell us exactly a reality that is outside for us to understand. Romans chapter 8. Let's go ahead. Romans chapter 8. Listen to what it says. In verse 5, it says, in verse 5 in Romans chapter 8, I'm not going to begin from verse 1 because I didn't plan for this. It says, For they that are after the flesh mind the things of the flesh, and they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. Now, there's a difference between those that operate, and this is what I was telling you. There are people that are children of the devil, and there are people that are children of God. The children of the devil operate on this, the flesh. The fleshly sensual nature is the one that operates in them. That's the modus operandi. That is the center of how they make decisions. They make decisions based on the flesh. Romans says this, for they that are after the flesh do mind the things of, for they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, and they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. Verse 6, it says, for to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded, it is life and peace. Verse 7, because Listen to what he says. He gives the reason. He says, because the carnal mind, Romans chapter 8, verse 7, guys. Because the carnal mind, this mind that is of the fleshy, that is twisted, that I'm talking to you about, is enmity against God. The carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can it be. You cannot psychologize it into obeying the law. It can't be. It disobeys God. That's the carnal mind. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, neither indeed can it be. So then, they that are of the flesh cannot please God. They that have allowed self, the flesh, cannot please God. But ye are not in the flesh. It's possible to be in this fleshy body, but to be absent in the body, but present with God. And this is what Paul was talking about when he's talking about absence of the body and all that. That's another topic altogether. So I just wanted to show you that there's a spiritual reality to this, right? Let me continue the message here. It says, listen to what it says. There is something that is far much more serious. That is the cause of this cold-heartedness that is in the hearts of people. It is not the present. It is but the presence of the veil of our hearts, a veil that has not yet been taken away as the first veil was, but which remains there still, shuts out the light, the veil of our hearts, which is shutting out the light and hides the face of God from us. God is not hiding, guys. God is not hiding. God is eager with a stretched out neck to reveal himself to you and me, to show you what his will is. God is not hiding, but we are hiding in the veil of self. That which remains and still shuts out the face of God. It is the veil of our fleshly fallen nature living on, unjudged within us, uncrucified and repudiated and rebuked and abandoned. We have not disowned the flesh. It is the closely knitted veil of a self-life. Come on now. A closely knitted veil of a self-life, which we have never truly acknowledged. We've never acknowledged. We've never confronted it. Maybe this is the first confrontation that you're going to have, showing you that you live a self-life and not a God life. That you are so self-indulgent, you're so much into yourself. Even the things that you do, even the things that you claim you do for God, it is self that is on display. It is this closely knitted life of self which we have never truly acknowledged, of which we have been secretly ashamed of, but we don't want it exposed out there. Because of this reason, we've never brought it into the judgment of the cross. Remember the symbol of the cross? And I'm going to read to you another statement here that I wrote down, I think, years ago. And today I was just reminiscing on it. I just want to read to you. This study is going to be a lot of reading. And if you don't like to listen to the word, you might as well just turn it off and then leave it, right? But if you want to really listen to the word, I'll ask you to pay attention, because this will help you to see something, right? Because we've not brought self to the cross. Remember, Jesus says, he that has not denied himself, he cannot be my disciple. We have a lot of Christians, but a few disciples. He that has not denied himself, you cannot be my disciple. Listen to this statement. I wrote this a long time ago in my old Bible, and I'm going to try to read it to you, see if you guys can see. It's quite old, and I'm going to read this to you. I'd entitled it The Cross, right? Because we've not brought self to the cross, and this statement basically begins to explore the Christian situation. And this was on my journey when I'm getting to be more serious about my Christianity. Now I'm homecoming, right? The Mike that you knew weeks ago and this one is different. God says homecoming. It's home run. You gotta come home. It's almost midnight. The world is about to end. Get home. Listen to this, the cross. Listen to this, the cross. It says, I think we, every one of us, ought to be humiliated and humbled. Every time we pick up the book of Acts, we talk about the book of Acts. Oh, look at what the apostles did. Look at how look at how Peter was able to preach on the day of Pentecost. Look at how many people got converted with one sermon. 3,000 people, one sermon, and then everybody else walks in and starts pleading. Look at what they did. Look at how they were locked up in prison. All of a sudden, they're walking through walls. Look at all that. But listen to this. I think every one of us ought to be humiliated every time we pick up the book of Acts and read the glories that attended the life of that first church. By contrast, it's the most successful kind of Christianity that we know. Look at them. Like, the people had to see them and call them Christians. They were not called Christians. That's not the name that they adopted themselves. But people look at them and they say, they behave like Christ. There's something, they have an allure, they have an aura around them of Christ. This is the most successful type of Christianity that we have been. The most charismatic, to be applauded, and is utterly anemic and does not bear comparison. You can't get that first church and compare it to which one, which church age can you get and compare it with Peter and everybody else in that first century church? How is it that these rude men, these fishermen, these louts, who have no advantage of the kind that we have enjoyed, were able to turn cities upside down and shake the earth? How is it? Why is it that we have not had a corresponding effect in our generation? The answer, in my opinion, is that we are missing the cross. In missing the cross, we're missing the power of a resurrected life. Paul says, listen, we've missed the cross. This is where we're supposed to take the fleshly self, the cross for crucifixion. And because we've missed the cross, we do not have the power of a resurrected life. That I might know him and the power of his resurrection. Paul says that I might know him. We do not know God as he is, exactly as he is. We have the figmentation in our minds. We have a figmentation of who God is. Even when we are praying, it's just the echo chambers of our minds. It's us talking to us talking to self. And we come out of there, oh, I prayed. We have sidestepped the cross. We have sidestepped the cross as a subject, later on as an experience in our lives. We don't talk about the cross. And when I talked about this, when I talked about the crucifixion of self and self letting go about 2 weeks ago in the church, I wanted you to see the opposition. There was so much opposition from members. Some members got it, like they really get it. But others were like, you could feel the struggle of a darling self to remain on the throne. So we sidestepped the cross as a subject and later on as an experience because we have no tolerance or sympathy for suffering. Remember, I started this study when I started talking about the diagnosis, the psychological diagnosis of our condition is that we are pain avoidant. We don't want to suffer. We want to be cushioned all over. We're a cushioned generation. Anybody that says something that is far much more opposite to us, we do not tolerate. We don't want to hear anything that goes against self. Listen now, I'll continue. It says, because we have no tolerance for self or sympathy for suffering, the denial of self in any form is suffering. In any form, every time you deny self, you are suffering, right? And we have not been encouraged to that. We have overindulged and spoiled our youth and compromised the truth in our marriages. We have suffered casualties and loss amongst our ministers, amongst our pastors. And we've given grounds to the spirit of independency. I am an independent person. I have my own view. My truth. Let me tell you something that is so demonic that you have no idea how devilish you are close to the devil when you say something like, this is my truth. There is nothing like your truth. You do not own reality. There's only, I am the way, the truth. The matrix of truth is one person, the way, the truth, and the life, and that's Jesus. If you feel offended, it's because it is true. It's because you have an ego. Because your ego is on your throne, you feel hurt when the truth is spoken, and Paul says that is supposed to die. Amongst our ministers, we've lost and we've given grounds to the spirit of independency and rebellion in the churches. Because we cannot stand pain. We parents, I'm a parent, who indulge our kids rather than chasten them, rather than punish them, rather than discipline them, are we being so loving or self-indulgent? No, don't do this. That placating, that not chastening do you think you're being more loving or self-indulgent? This is about you. It's about you. It's not even about the child. You're doing it for you. I've known mothers that are breastfeeding their kids way over the weaning period. Why do you think they do that for? You think it's for the kid? It's for herself. Mothers that are busy, it's for our self-soothing. It's not even about the child. Overindulgence of our kids. We pastors, I'm talking to pastors. I know a lot of pastors that are my friends out there. It says, we pastors who have condescended to placate men rather than speak the truth to them in love, why are we being so sparing? We sense, you guys that sit in the pews now, who see the defects of the things that are needed to be corrected in each other, why are we so silent? Where are the Pauls of our generation who would confront the Peters? Remember Paul and Peter? And Peter was confronted. Listen to what it says. When Peter compromised the gospel by being one thing with another group and doing another thing with another group, Paul would not entertain the situation to go beyond the moment. It ends right here. You don't overstep, Peter. Beyond the moment. For the purity of the gospel's sake, he confronted who? He confronted Peter. And I call that love. But you know that kind of love as an act is painful and is humiliating. It's easy to be misunderstood, and for that reason we keep quiet. We'd rather not say anything because I know how many people have misunderstood me as a person. Very easy. And it's easy for you to just keep quiet and not say anything because you're being misunderstood, right? For this reason, we are running amok. The world is running amok with us. For this reason, we are moving into increasing carnality, not being corrected by one another. The avoidance of pain is a costly avoidance. And the symbol of the cross, remember, that's where we've not taken self. We've not taken self to the cross for it to be judged, right? For this reason, we've never brought the judgment of the cross to self. Now, the avoidance of pain is a costly avoidance. And the symbol of the cross at the heart of our faith as Christians is an invitation to share into his suffering. In a word, our Christianity has degraded into a middle-class club, a sanctified cover-up for the status quo, a virtuous praise club, an equating of gain to godliness. That's the matrix that we use today. If only I gain, then I know I'm favored of God. Not suffering. No. The cross symbolizes suffering. And I don't want to suffer. I just want to be Christian. I just want to be my own. I just want to be like, we are so gay in our Christianity. Have you ever seen how gay people behave? That's how we behave in our Christianity. That we're a gay community, most of us. That's so demonic that we do not know that that's our behavior. We're blind to the fact that we behave like that. So we're in a comfortable religiosity that leaves our real interest and our real core issues unchallenged and undisturbed in avoidance of the cross of Jesus Christ. Somehow, I'm naive to think that we ought to be different. We ought to look different. We ought to speak different. We ought to sound different. It's naive to think like that. Why is so weird? Why is so? Come on. Let's just talk about the nice things, right? Somehow, I'm naive to think that there ought to be a savor of life unto a fragrance of life, of the life of Jesus around us that brings of life unto life, but death unto those that refuse it. The fact that we can so easily be tolerated by the world, the fact of the complete absence of reproach from the world, later on, the absence of persecution in itself is a shameful testimony that we are so unlike the world. That we are the same. We're so unlike the world. We cannot be distinguished from them. When years ago, when I wrote this statement here, in my Christian journey, I didn't know that is exactly where God would call me to be home now. Now I'm going to continue reading the statement here about self. Then let's see where we take the study. I don't know how many minutes we have, but we still have some minutes. It's not too mysterious. This opaque veil of self, the veil of self that we're talking about, nor is it hard to identify. We have but to look into our hearts. And this is where self-examination comes in. There are a lot of people that don't do self-examination. There are a lot of people that don't want to sit with themselves. We have so many things to distract us that we don't want to sit with our own thoughts to begin to do self-investigation in the light of the Bible and begin to see exactly who you are. You do not do self. That's why you're always, I just want to go. I just want to spend time with this. Because you don't want to sit. You don't want to live with you. Because you know how ugly self is inside you. It's so mysterious. All we have to do is look into our own hearts and we shall see it there. Sewn, this veil is sewn and purchased, repaired, but it is nevertheless an enemy of our lives. And it blocks the effectual Christian life that you ought to have. Cross veil is rent. Remember when Jesus died on the cross, there was a veil that was rent in between, but ours remained intact. The veil of self. Jesus did not please self. He sacrificed himself. Self-renouncing love. Self-sacrificing love. That was key for him. That was the theme of his life. Ours remains intact. It's patched up and sewn together. We're unwilling to allow it to be parted because it can be split only by the same process by which the original veil was split, the veil that we will talk about in the Bible just now. The work of Calvary, the work of the cross, the death of the flesh is the only way self must be crucified. Now, let us examine by faith a living reality that is in the Bible and why we're so lost right now. I want us to examine the living reality that is in the Bible when it comes to self, right? Now, this will require your faith, and we're going to jump here and there, go into the Bible, and I'm going to show you some things in the Bible that are going to require you. Remember, one of the injunctions that I say when starting this study, it's an ultimate demand of your faith. Right? The faith to believe that the veil that covers the most holy place in heaven, and I'll give you the verses we'll read. The most holy place in heaven, of all holy places, which barred every soul from entry except Aaron, the high priest, would go in, except the high priest once a year. Remember there was that event on the Day of Atonement, on the 10th day of the 7th month, the high priest would go in, right? Now that veil has been opened and is available to you and me. And that's why I'm saying this is going to demand your ultimate faith to believe that this is the reality that is going on right now. Can you believe that? You can come into the holiest of all and have communion with the Lord over the mercy seat and between the cherubims, where he said, I will meet with you above and between and will be in communion with you. That's what the Bible says, right? And will give you instructions for the children of Israel. Now, this is a timely and eternal provision that God has made for us. The earthly tabernacle, I'll give you a description of the earthly tabernacle in Exodus, right? You can go to Exodus chapter 5. I'll read Exodus chapter 25, sorry. Let's look at this earthly tabernacle, which is no longer in existence. God had given them, it's no longer in existence, right? But we have nevertheless a replica of the heavenly pattern that was given on the mount. Because when Moses was taught, as we're going to read, we'll read the next verse. When Moses was taught in Exodus chapter 25, let them make me a sanctuary, it was after the pattern. There's a pattern. So there's a replica in heaven. And our orientation, guys, and I'm going to end very soon in this study. Our orientation right now as Christians should be to gather around the activities that are happening in that replica in the Bible right now, where the high priest is interceding for us in our behalf. That is our orientations as Christians. Once we orient ourselves towards that reality, everything else begins to change. Our horizontal interactions begins to change because our vertical interaction is now aligned. And if we do not align our lives, tell your pastor, please beg your pastor, if he knows anything about the sanctuary preaching that is in the Bible, he should be teaching you this. You pay him for that. You don't give tithe to me. Perhaps there's only one individual that gives to this ministry. One. Listen, the earthly tabernacle was no longer in existence, but nevertheless a replica of the heavenly pattern on the mount. Moses was instructed that there's something that is already in existence. I want you to get everything that you're going to make about this sanctuary, pattern it after this. Right? Exodus. Let's read Exodus quickly. Exodus 25, verse 8 and 10 to 10. It says, but let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Verse 9. According to all that I showed thee after the pattern of the tabernacle. Is referring to the tabernacle in heaven, after the pattern of the tabernacle. The instructions thereof, and so you shall make it. So there is a living reality of the sanctuary in heaven, right? Now, we are reliably taught that that veil in the Bible, in the book of Matthew, remember that veil that was torn? Matthew chapter 25, 27. Let's read Matthew chapter 27. And we'll see what the Jews say about that veil, right? Matthew chapter 27, verse 51, it says, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in between or twine from the top to the bottom. And the earthquake did quake the earth, and the rocks were rent as well. And you see when you read Matthew chapter 27, verse 51, after this verse, you find that there were people that were resurrected as a result of that veil, the veil being torn in between from the top to the bottom, right? Very interesting phenomenon. Now, we're reliably taught by the Jews. This is what the Jewish writing says. It says that the veil that was covering the entrance of the holy place in the temple was 9 inches thick. It was very thick and heavy, right? It was split in between the moment when Jesus died. How is it then that few of us have got access to that place today, to enter into that was torn in between, to get into the most holy place? Now remember, no one entered the most holy place in the biblical structure except for the high priest Jesus. So how do we enter into the holy place? We only enter via him, right? And it ought to be a faith experience. You ought to have faith in the high priest that has entered in there, right? Listen to what Hebrews says. In Hebrews chapter chapter 4, verse 16, he says, let us therefore, this is an invitation. It's an invitation and the promise that God is making. Listen to what he says. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace. Come on now. Before it turns into a throne of judgment, it's the throne of grace. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain. There is an obtaining of mercy and find grace to help in times of need. We have an invitation and the promise to come boldly. Now, you could not, in the sanctuary system that Moses was given in Exodus 25, no one could boldly go in there. You would die. Even the high priest, you see the realities as we go. Even the high priest was not safe going on into there. So this reality that has been obtained for us by a new and living way, and that's the veil that has been rent that we're talking about. The veil that has been rent, right? Let us come boldly into the throne of grace that we may obtain grace in times of need. This is an invitation and the promise to come boldly into the throne of God, where the invitation of divine presence is, and where God waits for those who come to him to find mercy. How else are we going to extend mercy to other people if we haven't been to the throne of mercy? The reason why we're so merciless, there's the coldness of heart. It's because we do not go to the throne of mercy. We cannot extend that which we do not have. And find grace and help in times of need. Let's view the tabernacle. Now the tabernacle that was constructed by Moses, this is the picture that I'm trying to give you. The tabernacle that was constructed by Moses, it had three apartments. There was the outside, okay, then there was the inner court, which is the holy place, and then the most holy place. So the outside, the inner court, and the most holy place. It had threefold reality. God is very specific about things, right? So when he builds on this structure, there's the outside where you find there was the altar of sacrifice, and then there was the laver where the priest would wash and all that. And then inside you find all the different stuff. And then deep down inside, all of them had petitions. There were petitions, right? There were curtains that were there, heavy curtains. And we are liably told by the Jews that curtain, that was there separating the last link or the bedroom of God. Come on now. The bedroom of God, where he's got intimacy with his bride, his people, where he's obtaining his bride right now. Jesus Christ is in the most holy place, obtaining his bride. He's coming back from a wedding. Read the Bible. Read Matthew 22. It will tell you that the priest is coming back from a wedding. He's obtained his bride. That's why he's obtaining and making up his people. Judgment is equated to the bride. Listen to what it says. The tabernacle was constructed with the outer court, the inner court, and the holy place, and the most holy place. Everything was petitioned. The holiest place of all, which only the high priest had admission to. Let's read it from the book of Hebrews, so that you know that I'm not just speaking from without. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 7. It was only the high priest that had access to, and I'm reading from the Amplified Version so that it amplifies, you understand. It says, but unto the second, the inner tabernacle, the holy of holies. Just like when we're growing up, right? We all knew you can't enter mom's bedroom or dad's bedroom. It was holy of holies. That's Jesus' bedroom. It says, the holy of holies, only the high priest entered, and only then once a year. That once a year period, that's the Day of Atonement that I'm talking to you about. And when you talk about Jesus, where is Jesus? He's in his bedroom right now, obtaining his bride. Once a year. That's the Day of Atonement. And never without bringing a sacrifice of blood, which he offered as a substitutionary atonement for himself and for the sins of the people committed in ignorance. Come on now. Interesting factors. I don't want to go into the sins of ignorance because that's another topic on its own. We'll talk about it some other time. So that's how the high priest entered. This was covered. This place was covered with a veil. Now, from the inner sanctuary, he alone could sound the name of God. The high priest, when he entered in there, he is the one that could sound the name of God. Now, the way he entered in there, he was wearing a garment. Now, that garment that he wore had bells on the fringes. These bells, they were golden bells, and then there were pomegranate fruits. Golden bells, pomegranate fruit. Golden bells, pomegranate fruits. Now, you wonder, what does that mean? What's the essence of this? And I'll give you the essence of the golden bells and pomegranate fruits, because they're very essential, trying to equip your mind unto salvation, so that you understand. The golden bells would sound, right? They would make a certain sound. Then there were the pomegranates, and I know the in between, they would hit into the pomegranates, and you know a pomegranate is a fruit that is reddish, and inside there are seeds that are packed in red, seeds packed in blood. Everything else was pointing to the substitutionary atonement of Jesus. The pomegranates, the golden bells that would ring. What's the significance of this? Now, the pomegranates, on the fringes of these garments, there were these bells that would sound. Now, if they stopped tinkering or sounding, the people would know that he's been put to death on account of an inadequate sacrifice for himself. Let me ask you a question. They knew that if the high priest stops sounding, you don't hear the sound of the bells in there, they knew that this guy is dead, on account that the sacrifice that he offered for himself is not sufficient. What would they do? They would yank, because they would put a rope around his leg, right? And if they hear no sound, they would yank him out. They would pull him out of the mouth. Nobody would walk into the presence of God. So the thoroughness, just go and read. Go back to if you really want to discover Jesus for yourself, read, immerse your mind into all the things that the Jews were given to understand. All these little things, they're all pointing to Jesus. If you begin to read the thoroughness of the sacrifice of that very, very day when the high priest goes in there, he had to bath, wash his body to its fullest. They had to dress him up in garments that were so clean. So the thoroughness of that whole process was trying to point you to the perfect sacrifice, who is Jesus. Trying to point you and me and our minds to understand that there's going to be somebody who is perfect and acceptable before God. When he walks in there, he bears you, he carries you. The boldness that you're going to have to even make a petition to God. The reason why your prayers are not answered, the reason why, it's because you do not know who stands before God. It's because you do not know him. There are a lot of Christians who Jesus is going to say on that Sermon on the Mount, the last sermon that he gave, the most important sermon that he ever gave, he says, I never knew you. No, but God, I prayed. God, I went to church. No. But you do not know him, and he doesn't know you. It says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, the ones that indulge in self. You are so twisted in yourself. So they would yank him out. So the whole of Israel held their breath every time the high priest went in there. That was the most important feast, the Day of Atonement. Everybody had to check themselves. Now we're living at a time where Jesus is in the most holy place. Are we checking ourselves down here? Or maybe Jesus is dead. We need to yank him out because we live like we don't have an intercessor. We need to yank him out. Maybe he's dead. Because there's no sound. We don't get the soundness of his message. Once a year they would hold their breath because he's making an atonement for the whole camp. So just as the high priest bells, those bells that I talked to you about, signify the unique sound when he enters the most holy place. So our messages, our gospel that we're going to preach out there, the gospel should also resonate with a distinct, powerful sound, signifying the final phase of Jesus' work as our high priest. The sound is to call to the world and emphasize the completeness of Christ's work of justification. Now remember, we say that the structure of the tabernacle was made up of three, right? We have the outer court, we have the inner court, and then we have the most holy place. The way the Jews viewed this is that the work that was done outside there, the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross of Calvary, 2,000 years ago, him dying on the cross for you and me, did not just end there. You understand? Atonement did not end there. Atonement folds into, it's like a piece of paper. Let me give you an illustration. So to understand that the Bible wasn't written in English. It was written in a Hebrew mind. So you need to have at least some understanding. If you're going to teach people, you're going to have some understanding of how the Hebrew mind thinks, right? So in the Hebrew mind, this is 3, right? You have 1 part, 2, 3. So in the Hebrew mind, I'm going to try to illustrate this. This is the work of Jesus Christ that he did 2,000 years ago. It folds into the second apartment where there is the candlestick and everything else. Then it folds into the last apartment. Do you understand this? So it's the folding in. Just like the 3 angels message in Revelation chapter 14. Those angels do not just cease. Oh, it is angel 1, angel 2, and angel 3. They fold into each other, and it culminates into the loud cry that we give. That's how it is. So you have Jesus' work in the most holy place. That is, he gets the atonement, the final atonement of the work that he did 2,000 years ago. He's ministering the blood of the cross right now. Because without the remission or the shedding of blood, without the shedding of blood, there is no remissions of sin. You're a sinner. You commit sin. I'm a sinner. I commit sin. I need the present warm blood of Jesus today. Without that, there is no remission of sin. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That is why John, when John sees Jesus, come on guys, when John sees Jesus, when he sees Jesus in Revelation after the resurrection, he sees him as a lamb standing as if it is been slain. The provision and the genius of God. No one on this earth could have thought about that. So our message needs to resonate with a distinct, powerful sound, signifying the final phase of Jesus' work as our high priest. This sound is to call to the world to emphasize the completeness of Christ's work of justification. He's completing it, which he achieved outside the veil on the cross, and is now sealing it in the most holy place. Come on now. The gospel, therefore, bears this unique agent message. It is agent. It is unique. Reminding us that the high priest's final intercession in the heavenly sanctuary, it's a call to righteousness by faith, a message of readiness and reverence of the complete work of redemption. As followers, we are called to let this sound in a very distinct way, in words and in actions, to proclaim the victory of justification as Jesus completes his final phase of his work on our behalf. The sound of the gospel should echo both the assurance and the agency, drawing others to understand and accept the complete work of redemption. Justification full and complete, guys. It is this same veil, the veil, that was rent on the death of Jesus. We read that he, Jesus, had made a new and living way through his blood, and once and for all in the holiest place of all. How many of us are living from that place? Which place, Mike? How many of us can tell right now that I'm living from, how many of you people, how many of us as Christians who claim to be Christians can tell that we're living from an orientation of the most holy place? Like everything I do now resonates with what Jesus Christ is doing for me in the most holy place. Like we can get your conduct, your act, where you are, where you chill, where you spend time with, and you can say that Jesus can approve all these things. No, but it's my life. We just said you do not belong to yourself. The worshippers of self belong to the kingdom of the devil. So if you belong to the kingdom of the devil, please just switch off this and go. Because this message will stand against you on the day of judgment. It will stand against me on the day of judgment. These are the perfect witnesses that are going to stand and say, listen, you heard the word of God. Or you blindly, willfully ignored the word of God. No one will ever give a reason to God for not that he has not made provision for everything. How many of us are living from that place, from the most holy place? Like literally, our lives are hooked to what Jesus Christ is doing for us in the most holy place. Or are we living for self? How many of us are finding counsel and direction from that place? Like you go to that place, not counsel with your own wicked heart, the heart that is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. You do not even know how wicked your heart is. That's your consultation. That's who you consult. The devil is setting you up for failure in this life and in the life to come. You won't even make it. How many of us know that such a place is actually available in the most holy place, that we do not need to worry or deliberate over what to say, how we're going to do this, but we can actually get instructions. We can download from the most holy place. We can download every single morning. His mercies are new every morning. We can download how we should live our lives every single day. My own observation is that our best and most sincere activities as Christians are meditated out of our human experience and nature rather than from the most holy place. You know, we can predict what's going to happen when you go to church today. You can predict. We don't allow an allowance for the Holy Spirit or for God to do his work. God has given us a very literal provision that is made available for us to enter. Once entered, we are to habitually find our source of direction, enablement, and encouragement from that place, which is the most holy place. It's a remarkable place where you do not necessarily have to hear the audible voice of God. Just being there. Once and for all, God has done something for us. I'll end here for today, but I'd like to join me next week as I continue in part 2 on the veil of self.